Oh, yeah. Okay. Uh, we're on to philosophical anthropology now. Um, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the study of what it is to be human from the standpoint of not biology and not culture, but in terms of a definition, an analytical definition. One way of doing this is to talk about human nature. And we'll look a little bit at what is human nature. Is there human nature? You know, people will say things like, oh, that's just human nature. Well, what are they talking about? And what's it like, this human nature that people have? That's Mencius is going to talk about that. We're going to get a little hint of that out of Kant, a little bit of that out of Heidegger. Another question that we want to ask is what is it, and I'll talk about the distinction in just a moment, what is it to be a person? Now, how am I distinguishing there between human nature and a person? Being a person isn't necessarily being made of meat. Human nature refers to the organism, Homo sapiens, and what is its unique characteristics. Being a person may or may not have anything to do with that human genetic code thing. Kant, for example, wanted to leave the door open to dolphins. And that was in the 1700s, and he wanted to leave the door open to dolphins, perhaps as persons, not as human beings. They're not human, but persons. And so what is a person? How can you tell a person from a non-person? This is always the question. I mean, this is always what's at issue in presenting a definition. And as we've seen, philosophy is largely about presenting definitions. You say, what is a human being? It has this sort of thing, has this nature. Well, what is this nature? Spell it out. If all you can do is talk in vagaries, you're not doing a good job. And it may be the thing you're talking about doesn't exist. It's important then that we look at these definitions, what it is to be a person. Can computers be people? Can robots be people? This is why we ask this question. What if it turns out that whales are people? What then? What if everything is people? Maybe we just are acting in the wrong speed or at the wrong frequency, or just our shortcomings are really the issue of why we don't see that other things are people, which are people. And that's the point. You have to have a definition that tells you one thing from another. Otherwise, nothing means anything. And all we're talking about here is a standard. Definitions aren't necessarily divine in origin. It's just a matter of passing a standard. What is the standard? Does the thing you're talking about pass the standard? That's it. That's all it is. No harder than that. The key is that your definition actually describes something too. If you wanted to describe what it is to be a member of our class, you could talk about being enrolled in section whatever of a course number thus and such that meets on Monday nights and all this stuff. In other words, all the characteristics that add up to. So if the class you attend meets on Tuesday afternoon, you're obviously not a member of this class because this class meets on Monday nights, and that kind of thing. See, it's a way of ruling things in or ruling things out. That's the principal goal here. If you haven't put out a rule that lets you choose, then you don't have a decent definition. Another thing to look at, of course, is that you don't accidentally rule out things that shouldn't be ruled, that should be ruled in. You don't want to set up a definition, say a philosopher that involves having a beard, and then you meet meet some of my female colleagues who don't have beards. What then? What about or my male colleagues that don't have beards? What then? Are they not really philosophers? So the definition needs to be inclusive where it needs to include, exclude what it needs to exclude. And it's not easy to do. And we see some of our philosophers here do halfway decent jobs. Others don't. And for example, we don't really look at Aristotle's definition of what it is to be human in this in this set of readings, but we will look at. So let's take a look at it right here, right now. That's all I'm getting at. Okay, take a look at it right here, right now. So what is the thing about Aristotle? Well, Aristotle says that man is the rational animal. Now, over the years, I've come to realize that Aristotle has to be understood properly. See, I used to think that people were essentially rational, that that's what he meant, and that therefore those who weren't rational were less than fully human, and they were doing themselves and the species an injustice in their irrationality. The best sense I can make of Aristotle, however, is that that's too strong. If that's what it means, then almost nobody is a human being. So that can't be right. That can't be what he means. He can't be that foolish. I think all he's really trying to say is that we're capable of reasoning. We are capable of doing the kinds of things that make rational behavior possible. You know, the orderly, scientific, principled thinking that other animals don't seem to be capable of doing. Now, I do think I would continue to say that those of us who refuse to embrace our rationality are refusing to embrace some of our humanity. But in saying that, I'm saying just exactly as if I were to say, if tying both your legs together so that you only could hop around would be failing to embrace your humanity in the fullest. We are a bipedal animal. To give up bipedality without a good reason is less than human. So that's, I think that's the best we can make of Aristotle on that. All right, well, I'll be putting out a little short thing on Mencius probably tomorrow, next day at the latest. We'll continue to have all these adding up as quickly as I can cycle them through. I'll probably sit and do a few over the Thanksgiving weekend, and then I want to do at least one little lecture at the end, which I forget what I called it in the syllabus, but what it boils down to is I want to talk about a couple of people in particular that have been overlooked by our authors. I think the principal reason for overlooking them isn't that the authors don't know anything about them, or not that the authors think they're stupid people, but that they don't compare easily and certainly not favorably to Eastern thinking. You know, the whole point of this, right, is to draw the parallels. How, look, Mencius thinks like this, and Kant thinks more or less the same way. You know, Plato thinks like this, and Confucius thinks more or less the same way. So these parallels is his goal, and as a result, he's left out some people, well, as I say, two people in particular I want to talk about, who stand opposite entirely to this tradition. Okay? By the way, so you'll know I'm going to talk about William James and Friedrich Nietzsche, two late 19th, early 20th century figures who've been very influential throughout the 20th and into the 21st centuries. So stay tuned for that, and till next time.